So, comma rules. There are 6 comma rules that we are going to take a look at. 3 of them you will definitely be tested on for sure. Though, and I'll tell you which specifically you need to know, like actually. And then the other ones are kind of bonus ones that I kind of want you to know when I'm teaching it, so you guys understand what you need to know about commas. Okay. So our first rule for commas is for quotations, and this works really well for direct quotations, which you guys will be doing with the persuasive essay. So when you have a quote, you use the comma before the quotation. So if I start with saying something like Jane said, you would have a comma before we start the quote. If you have a quote and you're starting the sentence with a quote, you put the comma before the quotation mark. So for example, I think it is a great idea, comma, said Jane. The reason is because you're kind of separating that phrase from something else. That's the main point of what the comma is in this case, because you're separating each section of the sentence. So in our first example here, we have the quote, the comma before the quotation mark, and then said Jane. In our middle one, we have Jane said, and we separate the quotation from the beginning part using the comma. So Jane said, comma, I think it's a great idea. And then the final one is a little bit trickier because you have 3 parts to the sentence. You have the first part of the quote, and you have a comma before the ending of the quote. You have Jane paused, which is kind of your marker, your dialogue text, with the comma before the final quote. And it's a little bit more kind of weird because you guys will get used to it more when we talk about more like writing stories and we talk about how to write those quotes in the persuasive essay. It'll be a little bit easier. But generally speaking, if you have a quote, you're either going to have the comma before the end of the quotation marks or before the start of a quote. And we'll go over some more examples with that as we go. So this is our first rule. If you're not sure, 9 times out of 10, the punctuation goes inside of the quotation marks. It's usually a pause and it's a complete thought. So again, we'll practice that and I'll give you an example. So our second rule is that we use a comma when we have a sentence that starts with a dependent clause. This also could mean an introductory phrase. So if we have a transition word, we're going to have the transition word and then a comma before we move on with the rest of the sentence. So first, comma, this happened. Second, comma, this happened. Finally, comma, this other thing happened. Other things, dependent clauses are fragments. They cannot stand on their own. For example, after going to class is a dependent clause. It is a fragment because we cannot have that by itself. We need another part to the sentence. So we would have our dependent clause or after going to class, comma, and then we would have a sentence. Lena understood how to use commas correctly. So Lena understood how to use commas correctly is a sentence, and we can pair it with that dependent clause if we start with that dependent clause. So we have dependent clause, comma, independent clause, also known as fragment, comma, sentence. So after going to class is our fragment, and then we put the comma between the two of them, between the fragment and then the sentence. So after going to class, comma, Lena understood how to use commas correctly. Could say something else like, before she can go to lunch, comma, Lisa must finish her work. It's a natural pause. Commas are usually thought as natural pauses. So if I'm reading this out loud, I would have like a natural pause for a second. So before she can go to lunch, Lisa must finish her work. There's that little tiny section of pause. Generally speaking, if you read a sentence out loud, you can kind of figure out where that comma is going to go based on how your voice kind of changes a little bit. Our third comma rule is fanboys rules, which is one of my favorite rules. Is you always use a comma before a conjunction connects two independent clauses. Independent clauses are sentences. They have a subject and a verb. So if we look at the example here, we see, I absolutely love winter, comma, but fall is my favorite. So the way we would make sure that we need that comma is that wherever it's placed, if we look to the left of the sentence, so we look at I absolutely love winter. If that is a sentence, then you check it off and you're like, okay, so half of my sentence makes sense. Now let's look to the other side of that comma but, and we see fall is my favorite. If we wrote that as a sentence, it is a sentence. Therefore, we need that comma but. We need that comma there. If I said something like, I absolutely love vanilla ice cream, comma, but I do not like chocolate ice cream, that would be also be a complete sentence. So let me show you guys this. I love vanilla ice cream, comma, but I don't like chocolate ice cream. So this is a sentence because if you take away, or if you delete the comma but and you put a period instead, it would be two different sentences. I love vanilla ice cream as a sentence, and I don't like chocolate ice cream as a sentence. If you had something like, I love vanilla ice cream, but not chocolate, if you had something like this, and you took away the but, and you just have, and you put a period there, you have, I love vanilla ice cream as a sentence and not chocolate as a sentence. That doesn't make sense because not chocolate is not a sentence. Therefore, I would not put the comma before the but. It takes a while to get used to, but basically speaking, the reason you have a comma between two sentences and between those two sentences with that conjunction is because each side is a full sentence and they are linking together. So really what's happening is you have one sentence, a link, and then the second sentence. The link is the comma and, comma but, comma or, comma yet, comma so, also known as fanboys. Conjunctions are words that connect two independent clauses. So again, we have our example, I like vanilla ice cream, comma, but I don't like chocolate ice cream. This is correct again because we have two sentences on either side of the comma but. I don't like vanilla ice cream, sentence. I don't like chocolate ice cream, sentence. The incorrect example, again, the reason why we don't need that comma is because we're missing the subject of the second sentence. So I like vanilla ice cream, we just said was a sentence. Not chocolate ice cream is not a sentence because we are missing that subject. Who doesn't like chocolate ice cream? That's what's missing. So that's how we tell whether or not we need that comma. It's a little tricky, but you guys will get some practice today. Our fourth rule for commas is kind of easier. All you need them for is to separate the city from a state and the day from the year in a date. So like if Salem, Utah is a place, you have a city, comma, state. If we're writing the date, just like you're writing if you're writing a letter to somebody, you would date it April 8th, comma, 2000, October 11th, comma, 2016. Sterling, comma, Virginia would be the city from the state, and November 19th, comma, 2020. That's our fourth rule. That one might be the easiest one. It's not super, super bad. You're not going to be tested on this one for the sake of it's kind of like you kind of do this without realizing it. All right. Comma rule number 5 is one of my favorites. It is writing things in a series. You guys have been talking about this for a long time, but really all you're doing in this one is separating each part from each other. So my favorite things are Pepsi, Harry Potter, The Color Purple, and Owls. And the reason why we need the commas to separate them is because if we don't have those commas, then they're together. So if we didn't have the commas, I would say something like all 4 of those things that I just listed would be together, which doesn't make sense. Pepsi, it's its own thing. Harry Potter is its own thing. The Color Purple is its own thing. And Owls are its own thing. Yeah. So another reason and another way to do this is and this kind of sneak peeks toward my favorite thing, the Oxford comma, is when you have a list and you're listing 3, 4, 5, etc. things, you have to make sure the last 2 items are separated by that comma. So it'd be Jane enjoys cooking, comma, her family, comma, and her dog. If we didn't have commas, it would kind of make it seem like she enjoys cooking her family and eating her dog, which is disgusting. Not a good thing. So we have to have commas that separate each of those things, which moves us into the Oxford comma. The Oxford comma is that final comma before the and. So the reason we need that comma is because if we don't have it, then the last 2 things are together. So in the sentence, I had eggs, comma, toast, comma, and orange juice, if I don't have that comma before the and, then it would make it seem like I had eggs, which is fine. Eggs are good. Toast and orange juice together, which sounds disgusting to me. Some people might think it's good, but I don't think it makes sense. So we have to have that comma before the and. Another way to think about this is if I asked somebody what classes they were in, they would automatically respond with, I am in English, math, and science class today. You have a natural response to say and before the last one. So we have commas that separate each of those things, and always make sure you have a comma before the final and. Our final rule is probably the hardest one, and it is using commas to reintroduce someone in the sentence. So basically the way I like to think about it is I have a sentence. So you guys have me as your English teacher. So you would say, my English teacher assigned us homework. That is a sentence. If I want to be specific, because there are 3 different English teachers in 8th grade, I would say my English teacher, Miss Lundy, assigned us homework. But that extra piece of information, Miss Lundy, that like clarification of who I am or which English teacher you have, that's extra information. So we put the commas around it. The way this works is that if you already have a sentence with those commas there, you can put a box around the word. If you can put a box around the word that you're talking about between those commas and take it out of the sentence and it makes sense, then you have to put commas around it. So again, I'm going to go back over here. So I'm going to say Miss Lundy gave us homework. That is a sentence. Miss Lundy gave us homework is a sentence. What if I want to be specific about what teacher Miss Lundy is? Maybe Miss Lundy, my English should be in capitalization, teacher gave me homework. Okay, so I have here, but Miss Lundy is the same thing as my English teacher, because that's true. I am your English teacher as well. So we just wrote it up here. I could take out this section in the middle and it would still be a sentence. If I can go bye-bye to this thing and it's still a sentence, then all I have, that's not what I wanted to do. All I have to do is put commas around it. Because whatever goes in the commas right here can go bye-bye and it would still be a sentence. It's a little confusing and it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but honestly, all you're doing there is not rewriting the sentence, but all you are doing when you're doing this last rule is if you can take whatever information is between those commas out of the sentence and it still makes sense, then you have to use those commas. So, example, my little sister is awesome is a sentence. Therefore, Julie, that extra kind of bit of things has to have commas around it. It's a little confusing and it takes a while to get used to. And we'll do some practice with this. This is not going to be one of the ones that I test you on when we do a commas test. This is one that I'm just kind of explaining to you so you know it. So if you get stuck or you're in the SOL and you see this rule, that you know what it is. And then finally, we have our comma summary, which has all of the rules in a neat little place and an example for it. So you can look at these when you are reviewing and or when you're working on your worksheet.